Hi YouTube, we're in Esther chapter number 9. So we'll read Esther chapter number 9 for our word of the Lord today. And it reads as, So on March the 7th, the two decrees of the king were put into effect. On that day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but quite the opposite happened. It was the Jews who overpowered their enemies. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the king's province to attack anyone who tried to harm them, but no one could make a stand against them, for everyone was afraid of them. All of the nobles of the provinces and the highest officers, the governors and the royal officers and the royal officials helped the Jews for fear of Mordecai. For Mordecai had been promoted in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the province as he became more and more powerful. So the Jews went ahead on the appointed day and struck down their enemies with their sword. They killed and annihilated their enemies and did as they pleased with those who hated them. In the fortress of Susa itself, the Jews killed 500 men. They also killed all of Haman's sons, and their names are I'm not going to even try to read them. So it was like Pershanthia, Dolphin, Alphatha, Porthia, Aldea, Ardea, Parmishta, Arisa, Ardia, and Valzatha, the 10 sons of Haman, sons of Hamathathai, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not take any plunder. That very day, when the king was informed of the number of people killed in the fortress of Susa, he called for Queen Esther. He said, The Jews have killed 500 men in the fortress of Susa alone, as well as Haman's 10 sons. If they have done that here, what has happened in the rest of the province? But now, what more do they want? It will be granted to you. Tell me and I will do it. Esther responded, If it pleases the king, give the Jews in Susa permission to do again tomorrow, as they have done today, and let the bodies of Haman's 10 sons be impaled on a pole. So the king agreed, and the decree was announced in Susa, and they impaled the bodies of Haman's 10 sons. Then the Jews at Susa gathered together on March the 8th and killed 300 more men, and again they took no plunder. Meanwhile, the other Jews throughout the king's province had gathered together to defend their lives. They gained relief from all their enemies, killing 75,000 of those who had hated them, but they did not take any plunder. This was done through the providences on March the 7th and on March the 8th. They rested, celebrating their victory with a day of feasting and gladness. The Jews at Susa killed their enemies on March 7th and again on March 8th. Then they rested on March 9th, making their day of feasting and gladness. So to this day, rural Jews living in remote villages celebrate an annual festival and the holiday on the appointed day in late winter, when they rejoice and send gifts of food to each other. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to Jews near and far throughout all the province of King Xerxes, calling on them to celebrate an annual festival on these 2 days. He told them to celebrate these days with feasting and gladness, and by giving gifts of food to each other and presents to the poor. This would commemorate a time when the Jews gained relief from their enemies, when their sorrow was turned into gladness and their mourning into joy. So the Jews accepted Mordecai's proposal and adopted this annual custom. Haman's sons and Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, had plotted to crush and destroy them on the date determined by casting lots, and lots were called Purims. But when King Esther became before the king, he issued a decree causing Haman's evil plot to backfire, and Haman and his sons were impaled on sharpened poles. This is why this celebration is called Purim, because it was an ancient word for casting lots. So, because of Mordecai's letter and because of what they had experienced, the Jews throughout the realm agreed to inaugurate this tradition and to pass it on to their descendants and to all who would be who became Jews. They declared they would never fail to celebrate these two prescribed days at the appointed time each year. These days would remain these days would be remembered and kept from generation to generation and celebrated by every family throughout the provinces and cities of the empire. This festival of Purim would never cease to be celebrated among the Jews, nor would their memory of what happened ever die out among the descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote another letter putting the queen's full authority behind Mordecai's letter to establish the festival of Purim. Letters wishing peace and security were sent to the Jews throughout the 127 provinces of the whole empire of Euxerxes. These letters established the festival of Purim, an annual celebration of these days at the appointed time, decreed by both Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther. The people decided to observe these festivals just as they had decided for themselves and their descendants to establish the time of fasting and mourning. So the command of Esther confirmed the practices of Purim, and it was all written down in the records. And that is Esther chapter 9. And I think there's one more chapter in the book of Esther. Yeah, has one more chapter, and we will read that chapter tomorrow. Thank you for joining me. God bless you. You have an awesome and an amazing day. Be blessed, my friends. Bye-bye.